you want that big arm QB. You want the legs, because if you're going to throw over the middle against Iowa, that's exactly what we want you to do. Welcome back to the ANF Podcast, where we cover Iowa sports.
Today we're going to do a breakdown of the Iowa Rutgers game, then move into a preview of the Iowa-Illinois game, and then wrap up some picks. In summary, we're back on top of the mountain.
Yep.
You know, I can't think of a bigger win than what maybe, I guess, it wasn't that big of a win last year, but Purdue, Iowa.
I think it's not about a bigger win. It's about most impressive win since the Purdue-Iowa game last year, where you kind of felt like, all right, that's the offense had its moments, and the defense obviously still stayed to the same standard, even a higher standard. And it is probably the biggest one over the last 2 years because of what happened in the West outside of Iowa.
Yeah.
Once again, Wisconsin, Nebraska, Minnesota all lose. Once again, they lose to inferior opponents. And you're essentially had 6 straight games of your direct competitors in the West go your way. And now Iowa's, opened up to having complete control of the West and in a situation where they had to win one game in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah. So, I mean, since the bottom of the mountain, the loss at home to Minnesota, everything has gone perfect. Maybe besides Minnesota, like squeaking one out against Michigan State,
right?
Everything is lined up.
Yeah, since like
and now
last
you're
week.
Now you're one win away against an Illinois team that's really struggled on one side of the ball. And it's likely going to be playing their backup QB, even though Altmaier's healthy. I doubt if they go away from them.
Right.
Or you're going to Nebraska, where they can't find a QB. If Harbaug's not healthy, he hasn't played that great at football, but they can't play Sims, and they might be stuck playing Purdy.
Right. You're playing either, Illinois is having a really hard time just getting stops on a consistent basis, and then you play Nebraska, and their offense is just not to the standard they need to be. And you only need one.
And I'll say this: we wouldn't be, pleased with a 9-3 finish and playing the Big Ten title game, but the minute that title game starts, you're going to be over the moon.
Right.
But for the season to actually be looked upon in a very positive light, if you can wrap this up with a 10-2 season, with the amount of injuries that we've sustained, starting quarterback, 2 NFL tight ends, injuries across the offensive line, you're going to look back on it as like this incredible, gritty season.
Yeah. Well, I think if you win the next 2 games, Kirk is most likely Big Ten Coach of the Year. Depending on how Northwestern finishes their season, there's a strong argument for their coach to be the Coach of the Year as well. Yeah. I mean, we did it in our preseason breakdown.
Jim Harbaugh won't be Coach of the Year?
Yeah.
All that adversity he's faced?
Exactly. But like when you did a preview of Northwestern, you were like, it's under 3 wins.
Yeah.
And now they're to the point where they're being not only, winning a lot of games, but just they look like a complete team on both sides of the ball.
We're probably going to look back on that Northwestern win as like one of the better ones of the season.
Right.
I mean, going into the season, we were like, there's no way we lose this team. And now, after a dominating performance against Wisconsin, it's pretty impressive where they're at.
Yeah. I think it's time to get into the breakdown. Start with the offense. And a player that we mentioned we drafted the top 10 players on offense, probably our second podcast ever, maybe our first one that we released. And we drafted Caleb Brown 4th. And the preseason hype, the in-season hype, and essentially anytime you touch the ball, you kind of lean forward and you're like, all right, let's see what he has. It was finally his breakthrough game. This game was.
Yeah, and I think you saw what we envisioned. He's not going to be, a master route runner.
Yep.
He's not going to be a guy that breaks the top off. But when you give him the ball, he's got very quick feet. He's super strong with the ball. I think every single time he touched it, he broke a tackle or at least made it difficult on the guys taking it down. And there's a place within Iowa's offense where that's a huge necessity. He essentially filled into the Keegan Johnson role.
Exactly.
And he's a dynamic athlete. Like going into these next hopefully 3 games in the Big Ten play, having a guy where you can just get him the ball in, not that advantageous of a position, in the screening game, in the jet sweep game, and he can make someone miss. That's going to be gigantic for this team when it comes to getting first downs.
Well, Brian took the route this game was to jet sweep him and to bubble screen him. And he had one catch actually within a normal route tree. It was an out route, and he made a hell of a catch.
Yeah.
But you have this guy you can get the ball to where he can just get extra yardage. If you think about offensive game planning and like who you're trying to get the ball on a consistent basis, it's all about them making a play outside of the play. And his ability to break a tackle and get 3 extra yards to make someone miss and get a touchdown off, something that should have been for 3 yards, got 8 yards. Those plays add up. And the more guys you can add to your scheme that you get them a touch and they do something more than they should. You think about Michigan, basically every guy that touches the ball gets more than he should.
Yep.
Those incremental plays add up. And it showed today. It showed in this game. Like we're backed up on our own within our own 10-yard line on the very first possession. We give him a jet sweep, he gets a first down.
Yep.
It's like, that's why we didn't go 3 and out. That's how he played complementary football, how the offense has a pulse. And it was a great sign to see. And I don't think we should have the expectation that he's going to behave like a true receiver 1 on other offenses.
Yep.
He's just someone we have to get the ball. Reverses, jet sweeps, screens, slants. Like, find him ways to get a ball in space and let him get the yards.
Yeah, that's a huge thing for this offense because we really haven't had a player outside of the tight end or running back room that you feel comfortable getting the ball with and like actually expecting him to break a tackle.
Since 2021, Keegan Johnson. And it's eerie how similar of a player he is. Because Keegan wasn't the, route runner that high-end players were, but he was more like a running back where if you got on the ball, he could make somebody miss. And you think of that Penn State play he made where, he was incredible in space. That's what Caleb Brown's going to be. He's that type of athlete.
Well, I think we can move now into Deacon's play. Mm-hmm. Outside of one giant faux pas that actually could have been a lot worse than it was, you saw him almost look a little bit like Nate Stanley.
Right.
That outside the numbers strikes where it's like when he was hitting those throws, it's like, man, you can add this to a dimension of our offense where we can trust in him to make these throws.
Right.
It's really starting to come together.
Mm-hmm.
And what I would like to point out is early on, 4 games ago,
Michigan State,
you'd run these combo routes on the corner where you're playing a high-low on the corner, and he would just stare down one guy. Mm-hmm. And he didn't really, I think we mentioned it in that breakdown, is he really lacks like the gamesmanship aspect of that, where you're looking high and then you're throwing low. And he did
the
that
aspect that Cade had.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's just, we were talking about this when we were walking the other days, but if he was just a starting quarterback at the beginning of this year, and he was a redshirt sophomore, and you usually would give him 4 games before you really judged him. You gave him the 4 games, it would have been a pretty bad 4 games. But if he turned it around in the 5th one, you'd be like, okay, there it is. Right. We let him grow up. And if we can have a guy where you can, because we're going to need in these coming games, especially against Illinois, you're going to have to throw the ball well. They're going to take away the run just by alignment. They're going to really force our hand. Same with Nebraska. So you're going to have to really lean on this guy in the next 2 games. And if you get into a Big Ten title game and you can get him, feeling confident and playing well, that game is going to become a lot more achievable.
Yeah. And it just, when he was going to that 2-minute drill and he made a few throws, I think the biggest one was the out route to Ragaini.
Yeah.
Ragaini. And we press off the corner and we have just a 10-yard out route to the far side of the field. The throw that Iowa football is constantly trying to make the other quarterback make.
Yeah.
And he roped it.
Yeah.
And it hit him right in stride and got the first down in a big moment. And I just kind of took a pause. I'm like, that's what Kirk has been looking at for a long time.
Yes. It all, we've talked about this, but it made sense.
It did.
And you had the
hardest throw in the game to make.
You had the flag route to Seth earlier on the drive.
Yeah.
Where it was like, he roped that one. I was like, okay.
Yeah.
And then he stacked the other one on top of it. He missed his next out route throw, but then he hit Caleb later in that drive. It was just the pick he threw, and there was a giant follow on Twitter about it, and it was just just a young QB
not understanding the zone concept.
Yeah, and I think I see what he saw because you have Raga running kind of like a quasi fade route to the corner, and what you're trying to play is that off corner.
Right.
And he saw the corner sit down a little deeper than he probably would have liked to throw the ball to Raga, because if he threw that ball to Raga, that's not where it's supposed to go. But just the concept, this is probably why it's good to move on from him, because the concept of trying to bait a corner on a curl route that's occurring at the 2-yard line.
I don't think even Brian would have said that was a read. No, I'm guessing there was some shallow route underneath.
He called the read. That's what I'm saying.
Right.
You gave him a curl at 2 yards and a fake, like the corner can play both easily.
Right.
So that's and like, it's 100% got to be the drag. I'm sure that's coming underneath.
The slot carried the fade though. There was whoever guard Regaini carried it, so that corner has no responsibility.
But he could still make a play on the ball. If his eyes are back on Raga, he could. He
could have.
Yeah.
But that I think his eyes were in the complete wrong spot, in my opinion, because if he's carrying and he's at 10 yards, there's got to be something underneath.
Oh, I know. There's a drag coming for sure.
So that's what, if Brian would be like, why, he probably wins the film and was like, that's what it's for.
Yeah.
If you see your slot carry, the corner's got 10 yards,
both of them off.
you have
an underneath.
That's what your read is.
Yeah.
And he assumed, because he just did the same throw 3 straight times, Seth, you have a deep quarter. And so he just didn't understand that corner has no 10-yard, 20-yard responsibility behind him.
Yeah.
He didn't understand that the end zone impacts the corner's philosophy towards deep balls.
And
that was why he made the throw. Not because he thought he'd stick with him. He actually, he probably saw him carry it. He just assumed this corner's not going to jump a ball, but he just didn't have the, end zone corner mentality where this guy's going to sit. He's not going to.
Yeah, that was a very difficult one to ingest in real time.
Right, and
because
you saw frustrated.
You saw the throw coming. You're like, oh, this is game changing if this guy picks and runs.
And
I think why we're going to see a move back to Caleb Johnson as the lead back here is because the O-line played very good, and they weren't really rewarded with long explosive runs.
Yeah,
LaShawn had that first one, the first drive where he went for like 20, just a really well blocked play. You could probably point out 2 or 3 more runs where the O-line blocked it for 9, just on their blocking alone, gave him a 2-way go, had LaShawn in space, and he didn't get anything more.
Yeah, it was if you graded out the running backs this game, it was a negative aspect for Patterson and LaShawn. Definitely LaShawn's, he never really found hidden yardage. He never found that extra yardage. And the reason why he won that starting job is because that Wisconsin game he had where he was consistently getting the extra 2 to 3 yards. In this game, and it felt like Minnesota game, and even last week too, he's starting to kind of lose that rhythm he had, that confidence where he's just kind of following the hole. He's not finding that extra space. He's not making that guy miss. And Caleb's the 3rd listed depth chart running back right now. After these last few weeks, I'm guessing Patterson and Caleb are going to start being more using the offense, as we saw late in this game.
Yep. Yeah, I mean Patterson's been designated as the short yardage back
and third down.
He's even struggled in short yardage. As a short yardage guy, he's really not breaking that tackle to get to 2. He's getting tackled at the point of attack.
He runs hard.
He runs really hard. It just, it's interesting how it's played out because he was better at, rolling off guys, but hasn't been as effective lately. You can think back to the Minnesota game where he had 2 pretty impactful 1-yard rushes that, could have got the first down, but he didn't make it.
It changed the flow of the first half, for sure.
Certainly. You want to move into defensive breakdown?
Yep.
So I think at the forefront of this, Phil Parker deserves to be the Broyles Award winner. You're taking a defense without a pass rush, without we have forced no QB to move off his spot all year, and you have a top 5 defense in the country. That scheme alone is obviously you're not playing with a full deck. You're really lacking some dominant athletes at your.
You lost your pass rusher a year early.
Yeah,
Van Ness. Like every other program in the Big Ten that's similar to Iowa or in the country, when they lose their 21-year-old, DN, superstar DN, it's a killer, and it hasn't affected Iowa as much as it should. Because I can't imagine this defense with Van Ness right now.
Yeah, it'd be so dominant.
Yeah,
but truly, what it's come down to is I have a difficult time actually watching other college football games and trying to pick out why are we so much better. Leading up into this Illinois game, I've watched them against Indiana and Minnesota. Minnesota's got an old secondary. It's got, a pretty developed. We're in game 8, game 9 now into the season. I guess game 10. And these guys have played their scheme for 10 games, and you're just seeing massive breakdowns. And then you go and watch the Iowa film back, and it's you have to just lean on how well taught these guys are, because you just see teams just feel handcuffed. You only see teams essentially go to 10-yard outs and curl routes. Other than that, this is without a pass rush. They're still not trying to attack the downfield. They're just trying to take what we're giving them.
Yeah,
and that's just a testament to how well taught Phil has these guys going. And now going into a couple schemes we saw, you could just tell Phil had this guy dialed in. Soraka was the OC at Minnesota for 4 years, and I think he's just very predictable because one thing I noticed, it must be some rule that Phil has that he solved.
And the rules for Soraka's offense and most offenses you'll see, and actually the Michigan cheating scheme is based off as well, is there's a check with me aspect to these offenses.
Yeah.
So you see the offense turn to the sideline, generally about 15 seconds left in the play clock. They'll check with their coaches who are, getting talked to by the guys in the booth that can see the entire scheme. And based on alignment, depth of corners, depth of safeties, what is the, aspect of, you see linebackers blitzing, maybe a DN dropping, there's a play call off of that. And Soraka has a rule where somehow Phil's cracked his...
Well, it's not only that. He caught him at like 3 different spots.
Right.
Where he would call... It's almost like Phil had what Michigan had, where he actually knew the call coming. He was that on point. But one of them was, if you had a 2 wide receiver set in a bastard tight end, so a bastard tight end is when he's off the line. And that tight end had leverage on our DN, so that means he's lined up wider than our DN. Our DN was lined up on the tackle.
Mm-hmm.
It was almost like Rutgers couldn't get away from it.
Mm-hmm.
You would see a check come in. It looks perfect. You're seeing this empty D gap available for you with off coverage, and your down block's going to be able to take this D end and likely build up to the linebacker.
Mm-hmm.
As the ball would snap, you'd see Castro dive from the slot.
Yeah.
Every single time.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, that's now pressing the running back who's running that way is now getting pressed and has to either cut back or run into Castro.
Mm-hmm.
And it never went for more than 2 yards.
Yeah.
And it happened 3 times in a row in the first half. And then once that alignment occurred in the second half, they never went back to it.
Right. Or they would fake it and go to the pass, right?
The second one, they're just thrown out of it now because they're trying to catch us. But then we went out of it too. Yeah. And it was just this wild sequence where it's like, man, Phil had you dialed right away, and then he knew that you were going to counter off of it.
Which I actually, speaking of that, is it the same set that Minnesota ran 2018? I remember we blitzed on the very first play of 2018 with Amani Hooker.
Yeah.
And it was probably the same type of
call. It's a psychological thing where we call for check with me within the Iowa offense because it does allow you to be smarter, but you have to also like exercise a clap with it so you can actually see what's coming. Mm-hmm. But they clapped and Castro went budge.
Didn't move. Yeah. So it was like an intentional.
Like, we're trying to
bluff and hard.
But that is like that is the flip side of the coin with the check with me offense. When you get positive window dress looks, you kind of have to take it.
Yeah.
And if that's your whole philosophy is we're going to call plays to the scheme that we're seeing, you can really get baited into it. And Iowa baited them the entire game with it.
Yeah.
But the other aspect was anytime that Rutgers got the first down of the drive, they would immediately run. Mm-hmm. Their 1st and 10 play was always a run. And we double ate them 3 times in a row.
On first down?
On first down. And it was like, oh, so Phil knows that too. He had some dialed up where it's like, that's their comfort zone. If they get a first down, they hurry up and run. And Phil didn't balk at all. He called double A's the entire time.
Well, because Phil's probably going through years of film.
Yeah.
Right? He's probably watched Soraka at Penn State even. It's like when they get a first down, their tendency is 99% run. And if I just see this, incredible tendency for this, I'm going to call it every time.
Yeah.
I'm not going to believe that he's going to change that until he shows me.
Yeah.
And if he's being rewarded by being right about it, he's even going to double down more. He's like, I'm not going to blink on this calling this double A.
Yeah. Well, and the thing with it too is it doesn't really hurt our pass defense either, because usually within that scheme, you'll see Hurkett dive to the flats. So then it's just a 5-man rush if they do pass out of it. But I think the idea is that you're trying just to catch him on the double A, like the zone. And that's the play that, Higgins made that run through and had that 1-yard loss. That was that exact call. And it's like, that's just the brilliance of playing a scheme like this. You're playing for one negative play for a 70-yard drive, because then you are so talented after that, and you're so well taught that it's going to be a 3rd and 5 at worst. And then you trust in your guys in a 3rd and 5, which is rare too.
Right.
Like this whole scheme just builds on itself. And it's all about just being really fundamental, allowing guys to play fast, and then allowing the coaching staff to, really tease out these tendencies that the coach has. Yeah. And that's why this works so well, is because it's just an incredibly well thought out idea.
Yeah. And you just have just longevity.
Yeah.
Like Parker's been able to go through, years of film because he's been here for as long as he has.
Yeah.
He can recruit the exact guy he wants.
Yeah.
And that has to be given credit to Kirk for never meddling with that system for as long as it's been around, and trusting in Parker when, early on he struggled. He had some down years in 2012 and 2014. And he just kind of let him grow into this, defense. And now the modern scheme it's been unreal for the last 3 years.
Well, it's so good.
Mm-hmm. And it's recruited.
Yeah.
It's going to be like this for a long time.
Well, it's the retention too. You can sell a guy like Higgins to stay till his 4th year.
Yeah.
Your D line's always really old. Your secondary is always really old.
Mm-hmm.
And having guys who just understand the scheme very well and have been intentionally recruited to be good tacklers.
Yeah.
It just keeps on building. That's why we're just seeing good defense stacked on top of each other.
Yeah. I think one last point we make about the defense is just the 12th man of Kinnick.
Yeah.
Really came to affect this game. Rutgers prides itself on being in 3rd and 2. That's what's their Soraka offense. What their goal is 3rd and 2 every single down and distance, or what they're, when they're on their down, they want to be at less than 3 yards.
Yep.
I think we drew 5 penalties, pre-snap penalties, offsides, guys leaving early, and that the defense played great, but Kinnick was truly a difference maker, and hopefully it can be again this weekend as well.
Yeah. So let's move into Illinois' offense against our defense.
Mm-hmm.
We are happy to announce a new sponsor for the ANF Podcast. The ANF Podcast is sponsored by Eye Surgeons Associates, proudly serving Eastern Iowa and Western Illinois for all your eye care needs for over 40 years.
So Paddock just had the 2nd most yards ever for an Illinois quarterback in a game. Altmaier is going to be healthy, but I don't think that you can bench Paddock after that game, especially after the game-winning drive he led against Minnesota. It's just one of those things where you had to let the mojo play out, and Altmaier's been shaky at best for most of the season.
Mm-hmm.
But from Iowa's perspective, we would much rather play a guy like Paddock than what Altmaier offers.
100%. And I think we're always concerned when the QB has legs against Iowa, and they kind of have a bigger arm. And Altmaier reason why he was a starter is because those 2 reasons. You could run him in design runs, QB reads, QB powers, and he'd scramble on 3rd down. And he was a tremendous athlete.
Yeah, very like a high end.
Like other than Wims, like maybe the best athlete in the West,
probably
at QB.
Yeah,
just in terms of speed and agility.
His speed was for real.
Like Hudson Card is not the same.
No,
athlete.
no one. Now that you think about it, no one else is not even close to it.
His issue was that he just turned the ball over all the time. He just kind of tried to do too much and made poor plays, and then his accuracy would lack in big moments. And Paddock's essentially playing a better version of college football right now with his style. I would compare him. The guy that jumped out when I first watched him against Indiana was Tanner Morgan.
Mm-hmm.
That's undersized, 6 foot, 190 quarterback. His legs aren't great. He's not going to pick up a lot of first downs with his legs, maybe none. You're never going to run him because if he gets hits once, he's going to die.
Yeah.
But he was extremely accurate in that game. And his ability to diagnose the defense off RPOs and, just out of straight passing sets, he did a great job of just finding the right guy, putting on their chest, throwing a catchable ball. And it truly, like going forward, they should go with him. He gives them the best chance to win, but he actually, as you said, is not the matchup you want against Iowa.
No,
you want that big arm QB. You want the legs, because if you're going to throw over the middle against Iowa, that's exactly what we want you to do. And if you're not going to have an inside zone read without a QB pull, that backside DN is going to push your tackle into the backside B gap. So you're under a lot more pressure than you are.
You're going to see front side slants. So what that means, if you have a running back to your right, and the defense's lines in front of you, they're going to slant this way to basically get cut off the running back and allow for a backside spill. But then we have guys filling from 2 high safeties to make the play. And if you allow for that, and we don't have to account for a QB pull, there's been a couple games where backed against Iowa State, we didn't really account for it.
No, we didn't at all.
And then maybe I can't think of anyone else we played that didn't have.
No, you're not going to be able to run the ball because D tackle play has been so good this year. If we don't have to account for your backside C gap and inside zone, and Illinois doesn't have under center play.
Yeah.
So their only run game is going to be out of shotgun.
Yeah.
And so you're running into our teeth, and you don't have that backside C. Like, it's hard to envision them running the ball.
And another aspect of this is that, Illinois' strength right now is throwing the ball, obviously. They're not running the ball at a particular level. I think I watched all their games back now. I didn't really see that many explosive runs.
Mm-hmm.
With how we're going to align against them, especially with the reality that they don't have a backside QB pull, you're going to see really light boxes. You're going to see 5-man boxes a lot, inviting that run. So then you can essentially neutralize their passing game just by alignment, because they're not going to line up with a 5-man box with how talented our DB is and go, we're going to actually take that option.
Right.
Or we're going to throw over the middle 2 guys where we don't know which safety's dropping into a hole and which one's dropping back. Their corners are both playing at a really high level. One's might be the best corner in the country. And Castro's had multiple giant picks.
Yeah.
It's like that choice is going to be a simple one. They're going to have to run inside zone.
Which is actually, it's crazy to think that this is probably the best offense we've played in the last few weeks.
It is.
They've been a clip better than any last 4 teams probably. But it's just like they play right into our hands. When you play Paddock. If they had Altmaier out there, you're more in a situation
we would have to roll down.
You had to roll down consistently. You would have a higher chance of getting beat over the top.
Yeah.
But man, I just don't see a consistent game plan for them that's going to produce first downs even.
Well, so they have 2 really good receivers. Isaiah Williams is probably the best receiver in the West.
Yeah, he is.
Bryant's really good as well. But again, a lot of it what you see with Paddock is over the middle throws, and how this gets neutralized by Iowa, not only by alignment and how many guys we actually play over the middle of the field, it's how our D line plays too. If you're going to run a drag against Iowa or even a 5-yard in, 10-yard in, that plays into our guys getting our hands up.
Right.
And by our rush,
there's no windows.
Yeah.
Because everyone is bull rushing too. So we're trying to create a pocket that not only contains your quarterback, but also doesn't give him passing lanes.
Yeah.
Paddock is listed at 6 feet tall, but he might be 5'10", 5'11", 5'10 and a half or 5'11". And so he's getting pressed by guys. The entire offensive line is over 6'4". Our entire defensive line is around 6'3" or higher.
Yeah.
So you have guys that are actually pushing the pocket, creating no passing lanes. And so those throws become even tougher for him to even see the crossers.
Well, I think they're going to, again, like why you see every offense against us go to the outside the numbers passing game is because of how we align and because of all that we just talked about.
Right.
And then if you're going to throw Pack out there and ask him to throw, 30-yard passes to the outside the numbers, that's not going to go very well.
Yeah, it's not a 30-yard pass down the field, but just by geometry, you're throwing a 10-yard out route to the far side of the field. That's a really long throw.
And
it's
if that's,
very difficult.
Say we get Cooper lined up to the wide side of the field and that's your pass.
Right.
Or and Castro's there too, who's made multiple plays on you. More I talk about this, inside zone is going to be their only option.
Right.
And if they're not running that at a super high clip, because
but they do have a very creative offense. I'd say watching them, you don't feel like they're out of the same set consistently. They're constantly using Isaiah Williams in motion and getting him in gadgety plays.
Yeah, it'll be a lot of screen size.
There's a lot of window dressing with a lot of things they do. And it is like a good offense to run.
Yeah.
So I think they're going to have to be really creative in how they attack us. They're going to have to really get our eyes in the wrong spot a lot, which is not, don't have a lot of success doing that against Iowa.
Yeah.
But that's their move.
Yeah, it will be a lot of jet motion, a lot of action. You're going to probably see handoffs to Isaiah a couple times with those off corners.
Right.
You're going to see screens to Isaiah.
Yeah.
But again, how we play this, essentially, we're just saying throw that 10-yard out. And I've had to do that game in my head. I'm like, why do they have to go to that? But then you watch, it's like we'll run a match zone where our safety will actually be guarding the third most inside receiver on a 3 wide receiver set. And he's got inside leverage, and he never balks on an outside fake or an outside fake to in. So like you probably watch this play over and over again, and they never, are devoid of their teaching.
Right.
So then it's like, okay, we have to throw a 10-yard out. It's going to be there, but that's just the hardest throw in football.
Right. Yeah. So just by scheme and personnel, they're going to struggle.
Well, and one play that we'll likely see if they do get to the red zone, they used it against us in 2020. Hit a touchdown to Barker, their tight end. But it's a jet motion action to the flats. They'll pump it and then try and hit a tight end at the seam.
Same play that Miami, Ohio ran against us in
2019. Saw them hit that play against Minnesota. I was like, I remember that one. But yeah, they'll probably try a couple plays like that. But again, with so many teams feeling probably pretty decent against our offense, and even though we had a better output, I still think they're going to want to put the ball in Deacon's hands to see if they can get an early lead on us. I think it's going to be a lot of just handoff and hope for the best.
Yep.
We want to move on to our offense against their defense.
Yep, let's do it.
So they're a 5-front defense. It's like true 5 D linemen. Like they'll drop the ends, but they're not movers.
Yeah, they play 3 real bodies in the middle. They're true D tackles across the board. In our preseason breakdown of the Illini, it was Randolph and Newton were, first and second team all Big Ten. I think Randolph was third team last year, but it there's a high expectation for this D-line to be very good because you bring back all 5, I think. Maybe at least 4 or 5 because Jackus was one of the DNs that they started last year. And they just haven't been to the same level that people anticipated. They thought they'd be, top 5 in the country again on defense in terms of their ability to stop the run.
Yeah.
And you turn on their first 2 games against Kansas and Toledo, and they just didn't have that. You were expecting their D-line to be dominant in the run game, but they got moved a lot.
Yeah.
And then you also need to add into the aspect their secondary had such a high turnover rate. You
lost
lose
everyone.
Sidney Brown, you lose Witherspoon. Everyone graduated. Other than I think
they lost a safety number 7. I can't remember his name now.
Yeah, he's a really good player. But Nicholson's basically the only guy that saw time last year that's back, and he struggled big time against Indiana. Was targeted the entire game. They just don't have the same personnel they had in the back end, and weirdly, that's impacting their front end.
Mm-hmm.
That they're just not, having the same ability to get stops in the run game.
Well, you're probably just playing longer possessions because guys are executing the pass game.
Right. And so Iowa's going to be actually a thing I anticipate them go to a lot to is being a base, 11 personnel, but going 5 wide.
Mm-hmm.
The same thing we did against Rutgers where you're bringing a tight end running back on the field, but then you split everyone out 5 wide.
Yeah.
So then you're basically causing them to go into a base set because they're going, well, we didn't anticipate this. So you're being cover 2 or cover 4 most likely because you can't call a roll
Or
set.
just 2 high man.
Right. And
or single high. We're going to put a lot. That's single high man against a 5 front though. It's like unless they're bringing the 6th linebacker, you're likely going to be fairly comfortable because you're not going to be able to. What 5 out allows you to do is to identify blitzers really well because any extra guy in the box, you're like, okay, well,
why is he here?
Why is he here?
Yeah.
So that does simplify the protection issue.
Mm-hmm.
Your only issue then is that, there's no threat of run. Right. But against a man-to-man team, that's not that impactful because the guy's going to be focused on the receiver no matter what.
Right.
So the only thing it does is it speeds up the D lineman rush,
mm-hmm.
which is it can hurt you, but
these guys aren't built to be natural pass rushers.
No.
Though. They will. Like Newton is their best pass rusher, and he will make plays. But the DNs are built to stop the run. They're not built to stop rush the passer.
Yeah.
I'd say. I think actually what we saw Indiana run a lot against them was RPOs.
Mm-hmm.
For some reason, you wanted to attack them that way. We saw it in 2021 against them at home. We ran Ragaini on 3 over the middle slants. I bet we have a lot of him over the middle. I think it's been a main tactic. It'd be great to see Caleb Brown get those touches as well.
Caleb Brown looked like when we watched his film early on, and then what he's demonstrated so far, his hands look really good.
Yeah,
and Rag is sometimes struggle with his over the middle throws, and Deacon's not going to take anything off those things. So
right.
Having a guy with strong hands at that moment is going to be. If I had to come down to what's going to be the most impactful part of our offensive output is how well do our receivers catch the ball over the middle? Because when you're playing man to man, it's actually a very difficult ask to catch a ball over the middle. Because you first off you have to beat your guy, and then it's usually coming at the break. The ball's going to once you turn your head, the ball's going to be there. If that thing is coming with pace, which it always was with Petrus, that's just a difficult thing to do. But if you can convert that, then that's where big plays happen.
Right.
So they're playing a very high-wired defensive scheme. Can we execute at a high enough level to break big plays? Because in the reality of how Illinois lines, they're going to allow for chunk plays. And we're not really a chunk play team. We're trying to, get 4 yards over and over again.
Yeah.
And if you're going to – that's where I feel like we really struggled last year was we want to line up and run lead 2 times in a row and then throw a slant.
Yeah.
And if you're in Illinois, like, please do that. We're going to play that man-on-man game outside 5 times, and you're going to drop one of them.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting if we change our tactic where we kind of lean into, okay, this is going to have to be a big play game.
Yeah.
It's not going to be some simplistic wear you down.
I think quietly Iowa could have a good game offensively in this game.
I think so too.
It came down to just one play, watching the Indiana-Illinois game last week. Indiana's on the 6-yard line on a 3rd and goal situation. If you're the defense, safeties, linebackers, anybody, it's a throw.
Yeah.
You have 6 yards to go on 3rd down. They faked an RPO. Linebacker, safety, all show. Run. And the corner gets smoked on a one-on-one move.
Hands it to him.
And he walks into the end zone on 3rd and 6 on the goal line.
Yeah.
And it was one of those plays where you're like, that's the worst defensive play I've seen all year.
Yeah.
You're in a 3rd, down in distance, any awareness on that play, you're like, it's not a run.
Yeah.
And why would I even like show myself at all to stop that? We have a 5 front already.
Yeah, I could be late to this.
Maybe it was a well-faked play, but it just, right when I saw that play, I'm like, well, this defense is playing poorly.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, I saw some communication issues where they just, we'll see it. Well, Iowa likes to run where you run a 3 receiver set, the 2 slot guys are stacked, and then you can kind of run some games off that. I guarantee we'll see that set because they mixed it up and let for a 40-yard touchdown. So, I don't know, it's just interesting. Like, their cornerbacks just don't seem good.
Yeah.
So, but are we going to be able to take advantage of the high enough clip? Maybe
I think
not.
so. I think there'll be opportunities too.
There will be opportunities. But
I think Brian will have the ability to get guys open.
Yeah.
It's all about if, like you mentioned, this game does not come down to us actually scheming up something that will be open. We will.
Yeah.
Just how they're playing on the back end right now. They're not playing good football.
Yeah.
It depends if we can truly just make the plays.
Yeah.
Can Deacon, be on target and then can the receiver actually catch the ball? Because last week, for the first time, there's probably games since Deacon started that he actually could have had better stats if the guy would have made a play.
Yeah.
You think of the one that went off Anderson's face for a pick.
Yeah.
You think to a few drops by Anderson in the Minnesota game. Like when he caught that corner route against Rutgers, it's like, oh, like he made the play finally.
Yeah.
Like maybe if we can repeat that, if it's not an outlier, that's what the key to this offensive production will be, is actually just making those plays.
Yeah. I agree with that.
Yeah.
Well, you want to move into picks?
Yeah, let's do it.
I'm going to keep it simple. I went 2-0 last week. Iowa -1.5, and then the under 28.5. I guess we took under 30. A little generous with that. After we talked it out, I was thinking about maybe taking the over on this just because I don't think Illinois is going to be that passive. But then once you walk it through, it's like they're going to have to be.
Yeah.
I think Iowa has just developed an idea of football where they're really not going to open it up until the second half. And if we can get into a second half game where it's 3-0, 6-0, I think we'll be very comfortable with that once we learn their offense scheme, what they're doing well. So I think the under 30.5, or I think it's 31.
It's 30.5 right now.
30.5. I'll take the under 30.5.
Yeah.
And I think Iowa -3. It's like we walk this through. You're starting to see some comfortability from Deacon. And if we're running the ball well, and I think Caleb Johnson's going to get back on the horse this week, he's going to have some opportunities to break some runs just because, again, they just play an aggressive set. It's not going to be a consistent look where he's not going to go for 4 every play, but he could go for 30 or 45. Good house and run. So I think Iowa's going to have enough on offense, and Kinnick is going to be insane this week.
Raucous, yeah.
I mean, you have a Big Ten West title game at home in November. Guys going to that game, Iowa, Illinois on paper is not, wouldn't have been the marquee game. Actually, kind of would have been in the beginning of the season, but at this point, no.
Yeah.
But everyone knows who's in that stadium is going to know the stakes.
Yeah. What's that?
And, November game in Kinnick, it's going to be a night game by the second half. I think it's going to be enough to put it over the top.
Yeah.
So I'll take -3 as Iowa. Well, for Iowa.
Just 2 picks?
Yep. I'm going to stick with the strategy.
Yeah. Yeah. Always got to take the Iowa under. I went 3-1 last week. I'm going to do 4 picks again. I'm going to do the under as well. Same reason why. I don't think Illinois has a concept in the scheme and the personnel to actually hurt Iowa. They're good offense, not built to beat us. I'm going to do Michigan -20.5 versus Maryland. I think this might have went down a little bit, but Michigan is just in bum slayer mode.
Yeah.
You watch them against Penn State. It's not only that they have the best 2 running back core in the country. They have a first-round QB. It's their offense line never messes up a play. Their tight ends never miss a block. I would say Michigan is probably the best Big Ten team I've seen in a decade.
Yeah.
Like you go back to even that
2014
Zeke and Michael Thomas Ohio State team. This team, just the offensive line, is the best unit I've ever seen in the Big Ten team. I don't
blocking wise, it's the best I've seen.
In run blocking, they got beat a few times by Chop, but man, they just don't miss blocks.
No.
And then you add that backfield where they don't miss,
Oh, and the fact that you can run McCarthy 3 or 4 times a half.
Right.
And he's the best player in the field once he gets the ball.
To go into Penn State's building in a huge game like that and win comfortably, like you're really good.
Yeah.
So I'll take them. I think Maryland's defensively is just not a strong team.
No.
I'm going to take Penn State -20.5 versus Rutgers. New offense coordinator. I think it's going to be, they're going to try to open up a little bit. Franklin understands like there's sentiment in his program right now that like he's not doing a good enough job.
Yeah.
He lost to Ohio State, Michigan again. Like these are the wins that he needs to, kind of clear the air a little bit. You add a new coordinator in the system. It's probably going to be a little more downhill. Try to get, QB playing a little more confidently. Rutgers, their offense is based on running the ball. We watched them try to throw against us. They had one guy, Dremel. They lost their second receiver. I don't know if he'll be back this week, but if you're going to run interior zone, inside zone as your main run play against Penn State, good luck.
Yeah.
Like, that's what they want you to do. So I'll take Penn State minus 20.5, and then I'm going to end with Wisconsin at home against Nebraska. Watching Nebraska against Maryland, they should have lost back that game by more. Maryland made some huge errors. Obviously, Nebraska, the last one that really killed them, but I think Wisconsin fully healthy. Fickle probably really feeling the heat now. I could see a big rushing game for Braylon Allen, him getting ball like 30 times, and Wisconsin pulling that out by about 10. So those are my 4 picks.
All right. Well, hopefully when we're talking to you next week, we've won the Big Ten West title. We can not even worry about the Nebraska game.
Yep. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.